The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Kensington Palace as Prince William approached the heavy oak door of the East Wing. His footsteps echoed softly against the stone floors, a sound that had become familiar over the years, yet today felt different somehow. Kate had asked him to check on the renovations in the old servant quarters, a project they had quietly undertaken without much fanfare from the royal household staff. William paused before the door, his hand resting on the ornate brass handle that had been polished to a mirror shine by generations of palace staff. Something felt unusual about this moment, though he couldn't quite place what it was. The air seemed heavier, charged with an energy he hadn't experienced before. Perhaps it was the weight of recent months, the constant pressure of royal duties, or the growing distance he sometimes felt from the everyday lives of the people he was meant to serve. As he turned the handle, William reflected on the conversation he'd had with Kate just the night before. She had been unusually insistent about him personally checking on this particular room, her eyes holding a mystery that both intrigued and puzzled him. Kate wasn't typically secretive about palace matters, and her gentle but firm request had stirred his curiosity. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a dimly lit room that should have been empty, cleared for the restoration work that was scheduled to begin. Instead, William found himself looking at something entirely unexpected. His breath caught in his throat as he stepped across the threshold, his eyes adjusting to the soft light filtering through the tall windows. The room wasn't empty at all. Instead, it had been transformed into something extraordinary, something that spoke to a part of his heart he rarely allowed others to see. Dozens of handwritten letters were carefully arranged on makeshift tables, each one bearing the royal seal but written in childish handwriting. These weren't official correspondence or formal documents that typically filled his daily routine. William moved closer, his eyes scanning the letters with growing amazement. Each one was addressed to him personally, not to His Royal Highness or the Prince of Wales, but simply to William or Prince William, in the innocent way that children write when they're not concerned with formal protocols. The letters came from children across the Commonwealth, from small villages in Wales to remote communities in Australia, from inner-city schools in London to rural classrooms in Canada. As he picked up the first letter, William's hands trembled, slightly. The letter was from 8-year-old Emma from Birmingham, who wrote about how she had saved her pocket money for 3 months to buy a stamp so she could write to him about her dream of becoming a doctor like her grandmother. Her words were simple but powerful, expressing a hope and determination that reminded William of why his role mattered beyond the ceremonies and official engagements. Another letter caught his attention, this one from 10-year-old Marcus in Liverpool, who wrote about how seeing William visit his school had inspired him to work harder in mathematics, even though numbers had always been difficult for him. Marcus included a drawing of himself wearing a graduation cap, standing next to a figure that was unmistakably meant to be William, both of them smiling broadly. The letters continued to reveal themselves, each one a window into a young life that had been touched, however briefly, by his presence or actions. There were thank you notes for visits to hospitals, messages of encouragement from children facing their own challenges, and simple expressions of admiration that had nothing to do with titles or protocol, and everything to do with human connection. William realized that Kate must have been collecting these letters for months, perhaps even years, without his knowledge. The palace staff typically handled correspondence, sending polite form responses to the thousands of letters that arrived each week. But somehow, Kate had recognized something special in these particular messages and had preserved them, creating this remarkable collection. As he continued reading, William felt a profound shift occurring within him. These weren't the formal communications he was accustomed to, filled with diplomatic language and careful phrasing. These were raw, honest expressions from young hearts that saw past his royal status to something more fundamental about who he was as a person and what he represented to them. The weight of responsibility he carried suddenly felt different, not heavier, but more meaningful. Each letter represented a life that had been influenced, a dream that had been sparked, or a moment of hope that had been kindled. The children who had written these letters didn't see him as a figure from a distant world of palaces and protocol, but as someone who could inspire them to believe in their own possibilities. William sank into a chair that had been placed in the center of the room, surrounded by these messages of hope and gratitude. For the first time in years, he felt truly connected to the purpose behind his position, understanding in a visceral way how his actions rippled outward into lives he might never know he had touched. The formal distance that royal protocol maintained suddenly seemed less important than these genuine connections. The sound of familiar footsteps in the corridor made William look up from the letters scattered around him. Kate appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of anticipation and nervous excitement. She had been watching from a distance, waiting for the right moment to join him in this space she had so carefully prepared. "You found them," Kate said softly, stepping into the room with the graceful composure that had become second nature to her over the years as a royal. Yet there was something different in her voice today, a vulnerability that spoke to the personal nature of what she had created here. William stood slowly, a letter from 9-year-old Sophie from Edinburgh still clutched in his hand. Sophie had written about how seeing Kate at a children's charity event had made her want to become a teacher, because Kate had knelt down to her level and listened to her questions about reading, as if they were the most important questions in the world. "How long have you been collecting these?" William asked, his voice thick with emotion he rarely allowed himself to express, even in private moments with his wife. The formal composure that was so much a part of his daily existence seemed to dissolve in the presence of these genuine expressions of connection. Kate moved toward one of the tables, her fingers trailing gently over the letters as if each one held precious memories. 2 years, she admitted, looking up to meet his eyes. "I started noticing them during the weekly correspondence reviews. Most letters get the standard responses, but these ones were different. They weren't asking for anything except to share their feelings, their dreams, their gratitude." She picked up a crayon drawing from 7-year-old James in Manchester, who had depicted their family as stick figures standing in front of what was clearly meant to be Buckingham Palace, everyone holding hands and smiling. James had written, beneath it in careful block letters, "Thank you for showing us that families can be happy even when everyone is watching." "The staff thought I was being overly sentimental," Kate continued, settling into the chair across from William. "They reminded me that we receive thousands of letters each month and responding personally to each one would be impossible, but these weren't about protocol or official responses. These were about something more important." William sat back down, still holding Sophie's letter, and reached for another message that had caught his eye. This one was from 12-year-old Aidan from a small town in Scotland, who wrote about how William's visit to his school during a particularly difficult time in his family's life had given him hope that things could get better. Aidan's parents were going through a divorce, and seeing William's obvious care for children had helped Aidan believe that not all adults would let him down. "I kept thinking about our own children," Kate said, her voice growing stronger as she explained her motivation. "George, Charlotte, and Louis receive so much attention, so much privilege, but these children writing to us, they're giving us something equally valuable. They're showing us the real impact of what we do, beyond the official reports and statistics." The room fell quiet, except for the gentle rustling of papers as both William and Kate continued to explore the collection. Each letter revealed another story, another life that had been touched by their work in ways they had never fully understood. There were letters from children who had met them at hospitals, schools, and community events, but also from young people who had simply seen them on television or in newspapers and felt inspired to share their own stories. Kate pulled out a folder that had been resting beneath one of the stacks. "These are the ones that made me realize I needed to show you this collection," she said, opening the folder carefully. Inside were letters from children who were facing serious challenges, chronic illnesses, family tragedies, or difficult circumstances, but who had found strength in seeing how William and Kate conducted themselves in their public roles. One letter from 10-year-old Maya, who was undergoing treatment for leukemia, described how watching Kate laugh genuinely during a hospital visit had reminded her that it was okay to find joy even during difficult times. Maya had included a photo of herself smiling broadly while wearing a tiara made of aluminum foil, explaining that Kate had inspired her to feel like a princess, even while losing her hair to chemotherapy. Another letter from 11-year-old David, whose father had been injured in military service, thanked William for visiting wounded veterans. David wrote about how seeing William treat his father with respect and genuine interest had helped David feel proud of his family's sacrifice rather than embarrassed by his father's injuries. I realized that we often focus so much on the big picture, the official impact of our work, that we might miss these individual connections, Kate explained. But these letters show that sometimes the smallest gestures, the moments when we're just being ourselves, can have the most profound effect on people's lives. William looked around the room again, seeing it now not just as a collection of letters, but as evidence of a network of young hearts that had been touched by their work in ways that official reports could never capture. Each letter represented a child who had been inspired, comforted, or encouraged by their presence or actions. "Why did you wait 2 years to show me this?" William asked, though his tone held no criticism, only curiosity and gratitude for what Kate had preserved. Kate smiled, the first truly relaxed expression she had worn since entering the room, "because I wanted to make sure I understood what it meant before sharing it with you. These children aren't writing to titles or positions. They're writing to the people they see in us, the humanity they recognize beneath the formal roles we play." As William and Kate continued to explore the collection together, they discovered that the letters were organized in a way that told an even deeper story. Kate had arranged them not chronologically, but thematically, creating sections that revealed different aspects of how their work had influenced young lives across the Commonwealth. One corner of the room contained letters from children who had been present during their official visits to schools, hospitals, and community centers. These weren't the staged interactions that appeared in official photographs, but the spontaneous moments that had occurred when protocols relaxed and genuine connections formed. 8-year-old Priya from London had written about how Kate had noticed her sitting alone during a school assembly and had quietly asked if she wanted to stand closer to the front, where she could see better. "I didn't think anyone important would notice me," Priya had written in her careful handwriting, "but Princess Kate saw me and cared that I couldn't see. It made me feel like I matter even though I'm just a regular kid." William picked up another letter from this section, written by 9-year-old Connor from Wales. Connor had been at a hospital when William visited, not as a patient but accompanying his younger sister who was receiving treatment. Connor wrote about how William had taken time to talk with him about football, asking about his favorite team and position, treating him as important even though the visit was focused on the patients. "Most adults forget about the brothers and sisters," Connor had written. "But Prince William remembered that being worried about someone you love is hard work too. He made me feel like a good big brother instead of just someone in the way." Kate moved to another section of the room where she had gathered letters that spoke to larger themes of hope and possibility. These came from children who had never met them personally, but had been inspired by their example or their public work. 13-year-old Zara from Australia had written about how seeing Kate balance royal duties with motherhood had influenced her own goals. "My mom works 2 jobs, and sometimes I feel sorry for myself that she's always busy," Zara had explained in her letter. "But then I see how Princess Catherine manages to be a mom and help people all over the world, and I realize that strong women can do amazing things. It makes me want to help my mom more instead of complaining about being busy." William was particularly moved by a letter from 15-year-old Ahmed, a refugee who had arrived in Britain with his family 2 years earlier. Ahmed wrote about seeing William speak at a charity event focused on helping displaced families, and how William's words about the importance of welcoming newcomers had helped Ahmed feel more confident about his place in his new community. "When someone who will be king someday says that people like my family make Britain stronger, it helps me believe I can have dreams here," Ahmed had written. "I want to study medicine now because I saw how you talked about helping people no matter where they come from." Kate had created another section dedicated to letters from children facing difficult circumstances who had found strength in their example. These letters were perhaps the most profound, showing how their public composure during challenging times had provided guidance to young people dealing with their own struggles. 14-year-old Hannah from Northern Ireland had written about how watching Kate handle media criticism with dignity had helped her deal with bullying at school. "I used to get upset when people said mean things about me," Hannah explained. But I watched how Princess Catherine stays kind even when newspapers write nasty things about her. She taught me that other people's mean words say more about them than about me. Another letter from 11-year-old Ryan, whose parents had divorced the previous year, described how seeing William and Kate's strong partnership during public appearances had helped him understand that not all adult relationships end in conflict. My parents fight all the time, but when I see Prince William and Princess Kate, they always seem to support each other, Ryan wrote. It gives me hope that maybe I can have a happy marriage someday, even though my parents couldn't make theirs work. The most touching section contained letters from children who had recognized and appreciated moments when William and Kate had shown vulnerability or imperfection. These young writers had somehow understood that authenticity was more valuable than flawless performance. 10-year-old Grace from Scotland had written about seeing Kate briefly struggle with her composure during an emotional moment at a children's hospice visit. I saw Princess Catherine get tears in her eyes when she met my friend Lucy, Grace wrote. At first I thought princesses weren't supposed to cry, but then I realized that caring so much that you cry makes someone more special, not less special. It made me want to care about people the way she does. 12-year-old Oliver from Canada had attended an event where William had made a small mistake during his speech, forgetting a name and having to pause to check his notes. Everyone was really quiet when Prince William couldn't remember, but then he just smiled and said sorry and kept going, Oliver wrote. It made me feel better about making mistakes in front of people because even someone who's going to be king sometimes forgets things too. As they read through these letters together, William and Kate began to understand that their most meaningful impact often came not from their greatest successes, but from their willingness to be genuinely human in their public roles. The children, who had written to them, had recognized and valued their authenticity more than their perfection. They see us more clearly than we see ourselves sometimes, William observed, holding a letter from 8-year-old Lily, who had drawn a picture of Kate laughing during a school visit, capturing a moment of pure joy that had clearly made a deep impression. Kate nodded, looking around at the collection that represented 2 years of careful preservation and organization. They're teaching us something important about what really matters in the work we do. It's not always the big speeches or the formal ceremonies. Sometimes it's just being present, being real, being willing to connect with people as human beings first. The late afternoon sun had shifted, casting golden light through the tall windows and illuminating the letters spread throughout the room like precious artifacts. William found himself drawn to a particular collection that Kate had placed near the window, letters that seemed to glow in the warm light. These letters were different from the others. They contained deeper reflections from slightly older children, teenagers who had watched William and Kate navigate some of their most challenging public moments. The handwriting was more mature, the thoughts more complex, but the sincerity remained, just as powerful as the simpler messages from younger children. 16-year-old Sarah from Liverpool had written after watching coverage of a particularly difficult royal engagement, where William and Kate had visited families affected by a tragic accident. Her letter revealed an understanding that went beyond what most adults might have recognized about the emotional toll of their responsibilities. I saw how hard it was for you to stay strong when you met with the families who lost people in the accident, Sarah wrote. I could tell you were trying not to cry because you knew they needed you to be steady for them. But I also saw how much you cared, how their pain became your pain. It made me understand that being brave doesn't mean not being sad. It means caring so much that you're willing to carry other people's sadness with you. William's eyes filled with tears as he read Sarah's words. That particular visit had been one of the most emotionally challenging of his career, requiring him to provide comfort while managing his own overwhelming response to the family's grief. He had not realized that anyone, especially a young person, had recognized the delicate balance he had tried to maintain. Kate moved closer to William, reading over his shoulder. She placed her hand gently on his arm, understanding immediately why this letter had affected him so deeply. They rarely discussed the emotional weight of their most difficult duties, even with each other, finding it easier to focus on the practical aspects of their work rather than acknowledge the personal cost. Here's another one that stayed with me for months, Kate said softly, picking up a letter from 17-year-old Marcus from Edinburgh. Marcus had written about watching them during a state funeral, where they had to maintain composure while clearly dealing with their own grief. Everyone was watching to see if you would cry or break down, Marcus had written. But what I noticed was how you held each other up. Prince William would steady Princess Catherine when she looked like she might lose control, and Princess Catherine would touch Prince William's hand when his jaw got tight the way it does when he's fighting back tears. You showed me that marriage isn't just about happy times, but about helping each other through the hardest moments. This letter revealed something that William and Kate had not fully recognized about themselves. Their unconscious support of each other during public difficulties had been noticed and interpreted as a model of partnership by young people who were forming their own ideas about love and commitment. Kate found another letter that had particularly moved her, written by 15-year-old Jasmine from Birmingham after a visit to her school during Mental Health Awareness Week. Jasmine's letter was longer than most, revealing a mature understanding of the stigma surrounding emotional struggles. When you talked about mental health, you didn't use the fancy words that adults usually use that make it seem like something scary or medical, Jasmine wrote. You talked about it like it was just part of being human, like sometimes people need help with their feelings the same way they need help with broken bones. My dad has depression, and after your visit, I wasn't embarrassed to tell my friends anymore. You made it okay to talk about things that families usually keep secret. William looked up at Kate with amazement. Do you remember that visit? I was nervous about discussing mental health with teenagers. I was worried about saying the wrong thing, about being too formal or not relatable enough. Kate smiled through her own tears. You were perfect because you were honest about being nervous. Jasmine wasn't the only one who wrote about that visit. Look at this one. She handed him a letter from 14-year-old Kevin, who had been struggling with anxiety attacks. Kevin wrote about how William's admission that even royals sometimes felt overwhelmed had given him permission to ask for help at school. I thought if I told anyone I was scared and worried all the time, they would think I was weak, Kevin explained in his letter. But when Prince William said that everyone feels scared sometimes and that asking for help makes you stronger, not weaker, I finally told my teacher about my panic attacks. Now I'm getting help, and I'm not scared alone anymore. The letters continued to reveal the profound impact of their willingness to show vulnerability and authenticity in their public roles. Children and teenagers had been paying attention, not just to their words, but to their emotions, their body language, their genuine reactions to difficult situations. 18-year-old Emma from Wales had written about watching Kate during a visit to a women's shelter, describing how Kate's visible anger at the injustices the women had faced had inspired Emma to volunteer with local domestic violence organizations. Most adults try to hide their feelings about bad things, like they're supposed to stay neutral about everything, Emma wrote. But Princess Catherine looked genuinely angry about how these women had been treated, and that anger showed me that caring people should be angry about injustice. It's okay to be mad about things that are wrong, and that anger can motivate you to help fix them. As William and Kate continued reading these deeply personal responses to their public work, they began to understand that their greatest influence came not from maintaining perfect royal composure, but from allowing their authentic selves to show through the formal requirements of their roles. The young people who had written to them had recognized and valued their humanity above their titles. They had learned important lessons about resilience, compassion, partnership, and courage not from speeches or official statements, but from observing how William and Kate navigated real challenges with genuine emotion and mutual support. They're seeing things in us that we don't even see in ourselves, William said, wiping tears from his eyes without embarrassment for the first time in years. They're teaching us that our imperfections, our struggles, our honest emotions might be more valuable than any of the official work we do. Kate nodded, looking around the room that had become a sanctuary of authentic connection. Maybe that's the real purpose of what we do, not to be perfect examples, but to be human examples of trying to do good work while dealing with the same feelings and challenges everyone faces. As the golden afternoon light began to fade, William and Kate discovered the most remarkable section of Kate's collection. Tucked away in a corner of the room were letters that had arrived in pairs or small groups, revealing that their influence had created ripple effects extending far beyond individual children to entire communities and families. The first set contained letters from siblings who had been inspired together. 12-year-old twins Amy and Anna from Manchester had both written about the same school visit, but their letters revealed how differently they had processed the same experience. Amy had been inspired by Kate's discussion of early childhood development to consider becoming a teacher, while Anna had been moved by William's stories about conservation work to develop an interest in environmental science. "We used to fight all the time about everything," Amy had written. "But after you visited our school, Anna and I started talking about how we both want to help people, just in different ways. Now instead of arguing, we help each other with homework because we both have big dreams." Anna's letter continued the story. "Amy helps me with writing because I want to write articles about saving animals, and I help her with math because she says teachers need to understand numbers to help kids learn better. Prince William and Princess Catherine showed us that families can work together instead of just competing with each other." Another pair of letters came from a mother and daughter who had attended the same community event. 15-year-old Zoe had written about how seeing William and Kate interact with elderly residents at a care facility had changed her perspective on aging and respect for older generations. Her mother, Helen, had written separately about watching her daughter's transformation during and after the visit. Zoe used to be embarrassed by her grandmother's memory problems and would make excuses to avoid visiting her, Helen wrote. But after seeing how naturally Prince William and Princess Catherine connected with the elderly residents, talking to them with such genuine interest and respect, Zoe asked to visit her grandmother that same week. She's been going every Sunday since then, and their relationship has become one of the most beautiful parts of our family life. Zoe's letter confirmed her mother's observations. "I thought old people were boring and sad, but watching you talk with Mr. Peterson about his war stories and Mrs. Davies about her garden, I realized that old people have amazing lives full of interesting experiences. My grandmother has been telling me stories I never knew about her childhood, and now I understand where I get my love of reading from." Kate had also preserved a remarkable exchange between a teacher and her students. Mrs. Patricia Collins from a primary school in Leeds had written to thank them for a visit that had transformed her classroom dynamic, while 5 of her students had written individual letters describing the same transformation from their perspectives. Mrs. Collins explained, "After your visit, something changed in my classroom. You had spoken to the children about kindness and inclusion in such a natural way, not like a lecture, but like friends sharing important ideas. The children started looking out for each other differently. They began noticing when someone was left out and making effort to include everyone." The students' letters painted a detailed picture of how this change had unfolded. 7-year-old Miguel wrote about how he had started inviting Jamie, a quiet boy who usually ate lunch alone, to join his friend group. 8-year-old Aisha described how she had begun helping Rosie, a classmate who struggled with reading, after remembering how Kate had emphasized that everyone learns differently. Princess Catherine said that some people are good at different things, and that's what makes classrooms interesting, Aisha wrote. So now when Rosie feels bad about reading slowly, I remind her that she's the best at art and she helps me draw pictures for my stories. The most profound example came from a family whose entire dynamic had shifted after meeting William and Kate during a hospital visit. 13-year-old Daniel had been receiving treatment for a chronic condition, and his younger brothers, ages 8 and 10, had struggled with feeling neglected as their parents focused on Daniel's medical needs. Daniel's letter described the visit. Prince William spent time talking to Jake and Tommy, not just me, even though I was the patient. He asked them about school and football and made them feel important too. Princess Catherine told my mom that taking care of brothers is hard work and that Jake and Tommy were doing a great job being supportive. 8-year-old Jake's letter revealed the impact. I was angry that Daniel always got attention because he was sick, but Princess Catherine saw me being grumpy and asked what was wrong. When I told her, she didn't tell me I was being selfish. She said it was normal to want attention from parents and that being a good brother was one of the most important jobs anyone could have. 10-year-old Tommy wrote, "After Prince William talked to us, I didn't feel invisible anymore. He made me feel like being Daniel's brother was special, not just hard. Now when Daniel has to go to the hospital, I pack him snacks and tell him jokes to make him feel better instead of complaining about missing family movie night. Their mother, Jennifer, had also written, "You transformed my family's entire approach to managing Daniel's illness. By acknowledging all three of my children and helping the younger boys understand their important role, you eliminated years of potential resentment and helped us become stronger as a unit." William sat quietly, overwhelmed by these examples of how single interactions had created lasting positive changes in entire family systems. The official reports he received about their public engagements focused on attendance numbers, media coverage, and general public response, but never captured these intimate transformations. "Look at this one," Kate said, her voice filled with wonder as she handed him a letter from a headmaster describing how their school visit had influenced the school's anti-bullying policies. The headmaster, Mr. James Wright, wrote about how the children's enthusiasm following their visit had led to student-initiated conversations about kindness and inclusion. "The children took your message about treating everyone with dignity and created their own kindness club," Mr. Wright explained. "They developed guidelines for including new students, supporting classmates who were struggling, and resolving conflicts peacefully. What started as excitement about a royal visit became a student-led transformation of our school culture." Attached to the headmaster's letter were dozens of notes from students describing specific ways they had changed their behavior, from defending classmates against bullies to helping struggling students with homework, to including isolated children in playground games. As William and Kate absorbed these examples of far-reaching impact, they realized that their work had been creating waves of positive change that extended far beyond what they had ever imagined. Each authentic interaction had the potential to influence not just individual children, but entire families, classrooms, and communities. "We've been thinking too small," William said, his voice filled with awe and renewed purpose. "Every time we choose to be genuine instead of just going through the motions, we're potentially changing multiple lives in ways we may never know about." As evening approached and the room grew quiet, William and Kate found themselves sitting together surrounded by hundreds of letters that had fundamentally changed their understanding of their roles and their impact. The formal distance that royal protocol typically maintained seemed irrelevant in this space filled with such genuine human connection. Kate reached for one final folder that she had kept separate from the others, her hands trembling slightly as she opened it. Inside were the letters that had moved her most deeply, the ones that had convinced her that William needed to see this collection and understand what it represented. The first letter was from 9-year-old Charlotte from Northern Ireland, who shared the same name as their daughter. Charlotte had written after losing her father in an accident, describing how watching William and Kate at public events had helped her understand that sadness and strength could exist together. "My mom cries sometimes when she watches you on TV, but she says it's because you show her that good people can be strong and sad at the same time," Charlotte wrote. "When I see Princess Catherine look serious during sad visits, but still hug people and listen to them, it helps me understand that I can miss my daddy and still be okay. You show me that royal people have feelings just like regular people, and that makes me feel less alone." William's composure finally broke completely as he read Charlotte's words. The tears he had been fighting throughout the afternoon fell freely, as he understood the profound responsibility and privilege of their position in ways he never had before. This wasn't about duty or protocol or maintaining appropriate royal dignity. This was about the fundamental human impact of choosing authenticity over perfection. Kate's own tears flowed as she watched her husband fully comprehend what she had been trying to preserve and protect in this collection. She pulled out another letter that had kept her awake many nights, written by 11-year-old David, whose older brother had died by suicide. "I was angry at my brother for leaving us, and I was angry at everyone who said he was in a better place now," David wrote. "But then I saw Prince William talking about mental health, and he looked really sad when he talked about people who are hurting so much they can't stay. He didn't say my brother was in a better place. He said losing someone to mental illness is terrible and that we should be angry at the illness, not at the person who died. It helped me understand that my brother was sick, not selfish." William looked up at Kate through his tears. "How did you carry these alone for 2 years? How did you read these stories and not share them immediately?" Kate wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, abandoning any pretense of royal composure. Because I needed to understand them first. I needed to recognize that these children weren't writing to titles or positions. They were writing to the people they saw in us when we forgot to be perfect, when we let our real selves show through. She opened the final letter in the folder, written by 16-year-old James from Wales, whose words had ultimately convinced her to create this room and show William what they had been building together without knowing it. I want to thank you for showing me that important people can also be real people, James had written. My parents always told me that successful people don't show weakness or make mistakes, that I had to be perfect to achieve anything meaningful. But watching you both over the years, I've seen that you make mistakes, you feel sad sometimes, you get emotional about things you care about, and you're still respected and able to help people. You've taught me that being human doesn't disqualify me from doing important work. James continued. Because of your example, I've stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be honest. I told my parents about my anxiety instead of hiding it. I asked for help with subjects I was struggling with instead of pretending I understood. And I started volunteering at the local food bank because I saw how helping others made you both come alive during your charity visits. You didn't teach me these things with speeches or advice, you taught me by being yourselves. William stood up slowly, walking to the window where the last light of day was fading into evening. The weight of what he had discovered in this room felt overwhelming, but not in the burdensome way that royal responsibilities often did. This felt like a gift, a revelation about the true meaning of the work he had been born to do. All these years I've been focused on doing the job correctly, William said, his voice thick with emotion as he looked out at the palace gardens. Following protocol, maintaining dignity, representing the crown appropriately. I thought that was what mattered most. He turned back to Kate, who was still surrounded by the letters that had changed everything. But these children have been seeing something I missed entirely. They've been watching us be human beings first, and that's what has mattered to them. Kate stood and moved to join him at the window, carrying Charlotte's letter in her hand. You remember what you said to me on our wedding day? You said you hoped we could find a way to serve that felt meaningful, not just dutiful. William nodded, remembering that private moment amid all the ceremony and formality of their royal wedding. I was worried we'd get lost in the expectations, that we'd become just figures going through the motions. We almost did, Kate admitted quietly. There were months when I felt like we were becoming actors playing roles instead of people doing work that mattered. But then I started noticing these letters, and I realized that every time we forgot to perform and just connected with people honestly, something real happened. They stood together in comfortable silence, processing the magnitude of what they had discovered. Outside the window, the palace grounds were peaceful in the evening light. But inside this room, they had uncovered evidence of a network of young lives that had been profoundly influenced by their choice to remain authentic in their public roles. What do we do with this? William asked, gesturing toward the collection that had transformed his understanding of their work. How do we honor what these children have given us? Kate smiled through her tears, the first truly peaceful expression she had worn all day. We keep being the people they saw in us. We remember that every interaction matters. Every moment of genuine connection has the potential to influence someone's life in ways we may never fully understand. She picked up a small stack of letters from the table nearest to them. And we write back, not form letters or official responses, but real replies from the people they actually wrote to. We tell them how much their words have meant to us, how much they've taught us about what really matters. William felt a sense of clarity and purpose that had been missing from his work for years. These letters had shown him that his most important role wasn't to be a perfect royal, but to be a genuine person who happened to hold a position of influence. The children who had written to them had recognized and valued his humanity above his title, and that recognition had changed everything. We need to change how we approach our work, he said, his voice growing stronger with conviction. Less focus on managing appearances and more focus on authentic connection. These children have shown us that people can tell the difference between performance and genuine care. Kate nodded, already envisioning how this revelation would influence their future engagements. When we visit schools, hospitals, community centers, we can remember that we're not there to be perfect representatives of the crown. We're there to be real people connecting with other real people who happen to be dealing with challenges or celebrating achievements. As they prepared to leave the room that had become a sanctuary of authentic connection, William and Kate understood that they had experienced something that would fundamentally change how they approached their roles. The letters surrounding them were more than fan mail or expressions of admiration. They were evidence that authenticity was more powerful than perfection, that vulnerability could inspire strength, and that genuine human connection could create ripple effects extending far beyond any single interaction. "The children who wrote these letters have been our teachers," William said, taking one last look around the room. "They've shown us that the most important thing we can do is remain human while serving in inhuman circumstances." Kate carefully closed the folders, but she knew that the impact of what they had discovered would remain with them forever. They had found their true purpose not in protocol manuals or official duties, but in the words of young people who had seen past their titles to recognize their hearts. Walking out of the room together, William and Kate carried with them a profound understanding that their greatest service to the people they represented lay not in maintaining perfect royal composure, but in remaining courageously, authentically human in a role that often demanded the opposite. The letters had shown them that their imperfections, emotions, and genuine responses to life's challenges were not weaknesses to be hidden, but strengths to be shared. This was their profound royal moment, not a ceremony or official event, but a private revelation that would transform how they understood their purpose and their power to influence lives, simply by choosing to remain real in a world that often rewarded pretense. The tears they had shed together in that room were not signs of weakness, but evidence of the deep caring that had always driven their work, finally acknowledged and embraced as their greatest asset.